This story is titled, My Mom Said I Couldn't Watch Your Daughter While My Wife Was in Labor. You're on your own now, I said, while canceling every payment. Hey, Reddit man, I've been debating whether to post this for weeks now. I guess I need to get this off my chest, and maybe some of you guys have dealt with similar family drama. Fair warning, this is going to be long. I'm 31, male, been married to my amazing wife for 6 years now. We have a 3-year-old daughter, and just welcomed our son a few months back. That's when everything blew up. But let me back up and explain the years of crap that led to this point. My family has never liked my wife, not even trying to hide it. From day one, they've given her the cold shoulder. Why? Because she doesn't go to their church. My parents are super religious, like the kind that go to church 3 times a week and judge everyone who doesn't. My mom would always make these passive-aggressive comments like, "We're praying for you both to find your way back to the Lord." Or she'd ask my wife when she was planning to get right with God. My wife would just smile and change the subject because she's classier than I am. My parents are both retired now. Dad worked at this manufacturing plant for like 40 years, and mom was a secretary at some insurance place. They get Social Security, but it's not enough for the way they live. So guess who's been footing the bill? Yep, yours truly. For the past 5 years, I've been paying their mortgage, $1,200 a month, utilities, another $300 to $400, cell phone bill, and even sending them grocery money most months. All told, probably around $2,000 per month out of my pocket. My wife never complained, even though that money could have gone to our own savings or a better house in a nicer school district. Now, my sister is a whole different story. She's always been the golden child. Growing up, she got everything handed to her while I had to work for scraps of attention. When we were kids, she'd get brand new clothes for school while I got handed down stuff from our cousin. For her 16th birthday, she got a car. When I turned 16, I got a "you can use mom's car sometimes if you pay for gas." I worked my ass off for 3 years to save up for a crappy used Honda that broke down every other month. These days, my sister is married to this finance guy who comes from money. They live in one of those fancy neighborhoods where all the houses look the same, and everyone has a 3-car garage they actually put cars in. She doesn't work, just posts on social media about being a boy mom. She has 3 sons, and shares inspirational quotes with pictures of her perfect house. She's one of those people who hashtags blessed on everything, and it makes me want to throw my phone across the room. Here's the thing though, despite the fact that my sister and her husband probably make triple what my wife and I do, we both work full-time, modest jobs, my parents still expected to support them financially. Their excuse was always, "Your sister has her hands full with the boys," or "They have their own expenses with that big house." Meanwhile, my sister goes on vacation like 4 times a year, while I'm over here counting pennies to make sure I can cover my own mortgage and my parents'. My wife and I have always lived pretty modestly. We have a small 3-bedroom house in an okay neighborhood. We drive used cars we bought with cash. We don't take fancy vacations. Maybe a weekend at the beach once a year. Most of our extra money went to my parents or into savings for our kids' college funds. My wife never once complained about this arrangement, even though she had every right to. She'd just say, "They're your family, I understand." Saint, I tell you. I tried talking to my sister about helping out with our parents a few times. She always had excuses. The boys' private school tuition is so expensive, or "we're saving for a pool," or whatever BS reason she could come up with. Every time I brought it up with my parents, they'd defend her. "Your sister has different responsibilities." It was always assumed that I would handle it because, well, I'm not even sure why. Maybe because I was dumb enough to say yes the first time. The real problem wasn't even the money, if I'm being honest. It was the complete lack of appreciation or recognition. I'd bring over their mortgage payment, and instead of a thank you, I'd get comments about how my daughter wasn't dressed warmly enough, or how my wife should really try to make it to church someday. Meanwhile, my sister would show up empty-handed, and they'd trip over themselves, fawning over her and the boys. Every holiday was the same story. We'd show up, and my mom would barely acknowledge my wife, rush through hellos with our daughter, then spend the whole time playing with my sister's kids and talking about how amazing my sister was for handling 3 boys. My wife would offer to help in the kitchen and get assigned the most basic tasks while my sister sat on the couch scrolling through her phone, and everyone acted like she was Mother Teresa for showing up. I put up with it because, I don't know, I guess I thought that's what family meant. Taking care of each other, even when it's not fair or balanced. Plus, there was always this unspoken thing that if I stopped helping, I'd be the bad guy. The ungrateful son who abandoned his parents. The failure who couldn't provide. My sister reinforced this every chance she got, making little comments about how generous I was, with this tone that suggested I was trying to show off by helping our parents. Writing this story now pisses me off on how I should have put my foot down years ago, set boundaries, demanded some balance, but I didn't, and things just kept going the way they always had, until my wife got pregnant with our son, and everything finally came to a head. During her pregnancy, the cracks in my family dynamic became impossible to ignore. My parents barely acknowledged the news, treating it like a footnote compared to whatever my sister had going on. Speaking of my sister, she was too busy posting inspirational mom quotes and planning another vacation to even pretend to care. Meanwhile, my wife was exhausted, juggling work, doctor's appointments, and taking care of our daughter while I scrambled to keep up with everything, including still covering my parents' bills. Every time I hinted at needing some support, my mom would brush it off with, "God will provide," and my sister chimes in with, "You signed up for this." It was becoming clearer by the day. When my parents or my sister needed something, I was expected to drop everything. But when we needed help, we were on our own. And I guess I shouldn't have been surprised when that became painfully obvious the night my wife went into labor. So last month, my wife went into labor with our second kid. It's like 2 a.m., 3 weeks earlier than we expected. Both of us are freaking the hell out. Not just because of the early labor, but because we suddenly had a 3-year-old to deal with while rushing to the hospital. Our usual babysitter is this college student who lives nearby, but no way I'm calling her at 2 a.m. We're panicking, trying to figure out what to do. My wife is having contractions every few minutes, and I'm running around the house like a headless chicken trying to grab the hospital bag, find my keys, and figure out what to do with our daughter. I called my mom. This is literally the first time I've ever asked her to help with our kid. Not like I'm asking her to watch my daughter for a week-long vacation. Just a few hours in an emergency while my wife is in labor. "Mom, I need your help," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Wife's in labor. It's happening now. I need someone to watch Mia while I take her to the hospital." There was a pause, then Mom's voice came through, weak and strained. "Oh, honey, I just can't tonight. My arthritis is acting up something terrible. I can barely get out of bed. I'm so sorry." My heart started pounding harder from panic. "Mom, I can bring her to you. She'll mostly sleep anyway. It's the middle of the night." She sighed, her voice still carrying that frail, helpless tone. No, I just can't. I'm in too much pain. I couldn't possibly keep up with a 3-year-old right now. You know how active she is. Our daughter is literally the chillest kid on the planet. She'll sit in color for hours, not like she's doing parkour around the house. I felt something crack inside me. Frustration, disbelief, hurt, all tangled up into this tight knot in my chest. This was confirmation of what I'd always feared. My family saw me as useful, not important. My wife was gripping the kitchen counter, her face twisted in pain, telling me we needed to go now. And here I was, standing in my kitchen, begging my own mother for help she'd never give. My anger was bubbling under the panic, but I didn't have time to process it. I needed someone, anyone, to help. So I did something I already knew was a lost cause, but tried anyway. I texted my sister. "Emergency. Wife's in labor. Needs someone to watch Mia for a few hours." She read it immediately. Those 3 little dots popped up like she was about to respond. And then, ugh, this is really bad timing. We have an early morning with the boys, and I need sleep. Sorry, can't help. That was it. No, hope everything goes well. No, congrats. Just a half-assed excuse and a brush-off like I was asking her to babysit for fun, not because my wife was literally about to give birth. I stared at the screen, stomach churning, before shoving my phone in my pocket. Of course. Of fucking course. The golden child had spoken. Desperation took over. I started calling friends, my hands shaking as I dialed. Most didn't answer because, it's 2 fucking a.m. But then, finally, my buddy Mike picked up. This dude lives 30 minutes away, has work in the morning, but doesn't hesitate. "I'm on my way," he says. No questions, no hesitation. And that's when I knew. Family isn't just about the people you grew up with. It's about who shows up. Mike got to our house around 2 a.m. By this time, my wife's contractions are like 4 minutes apart. We rushed to the hospital, barely making it in time. Our son was born at 5 a.m., healthy but small since he was early. My wife was incredible through the whole thing. Absolute warrior. After making sure they were both stable and resting, I headed back to get our daughter from Mike's place around noon. I wanted to bring her to meet her new brother. Mike's wife had taken the day off work to help with my daughter, made her pancakes for breakfast, even braided her hair. These people are angels. On the way back to the hospital, I realized we need the extra car seat base we keep at my parents' house for when they, rarely, watch our daughter. I'm exhausted, running on 0 sleep, emotional from birth, but I figure I'll just swing by, grab it quick, and head to the hospital. I use my key to let myself in. I've had one for years since I'm always checking on them or fixing things around their house. It's around dinner time. I walk in, and the first thing I hear is laughter. Lots of it. I follow the noise to the dining room, and what do I find? A full-on family dinner party. My sister, her husband, their 3 boys, and my parents all sitting around the table like a fucking Norman Rockwell painting. Good food, wine glasses, the works. And my mom, the one who could barely move from her arthritis this morning, she's chasing my 4-year-old nephew around the living room, tickling him as he shrieks with laughter. Everyone freezes when they see me standing there. The laughter stops instantly. My mom's face does this weird thing where she looks guilty for a split second before switching to annoyed, like I'm the one who did something wrong by showing up unannounced. "Oh, we weren't expecting you," she says, all flustered. "How's everything?" She doesn't even remember my wife was in labor, or doesn't care. No one at the table asks about my wife or the baby. My sister just gives me this look like I'm interrupting something important. My dad stares at his plate. The silence is deafening. I'm standing there, still in the same clothes from last night, probably looking like absolute hell, holding my keys in my hand, and something in me just snaps. "So you're too sick to help your own son when his wife is having a baby, but you're perfectly fine hosting a dinner party?" I ask, my voice weirdly calm considering I'm about to lose my shit. Mom immediately gets defensive. "It's not a dinner party, it's just family. And your sister needed help with the boys today." I look over at my sister, who suddenly finds her mashed potatoes super interesting. She won't meet my eyes. "Her husband is literally right there," I point out. "And he doesn't work on Fridays. But sure, she needed help." My dad finally speaks up. "Son, your mother's been on her feet all day. She's pushing through the pain to help your sister. But she couldn't push through it for me? For her grandchild being born?" My voice is getting louder now. "That's different," my mom says with this dismissive wave that makes my blood boil. "How? Is it different?" I'm full-on shouting now. "Because it's me asking? Because my wife isn't good enough for you? Because we don't fit into your perfect little church image?" My sister's husband, who I actually don't hate, he's just oblivious to the family dynamics, looks uncomfortable as hell. The kids have gone quiet, which makes me lower my voice a bit. "My wife gave birth today," I said. "Our son was born at 5:13 this morning. Not that any of you bothered to ask. I had to beg a friend to watch my daughter because my own mother lied about being too sick to help." My mom starts with the waterworks. Classic move when she's backed into a corner. "I wasn't lying. I just pushed myself to feel better because your sister—" "Save it," I cut her off. "I get it now. I've always been an afterthought in this family. The only thing you've ever valued about me is my checkbook." At that moment, my sister shot up from her seat, hands raised like she was some kind of hostage negotiator. All right. Let's not turn this into a scene," she said, her voice sugary but tight, her eyes flicking toward her husband's parents, like this was all so inconvenient for her. "You're obviously upset. Why don't you just go home, cool off, and we'll talk later, okay? Like I was some unhinged lunatic ruining her nice dinner. Like I was the embarrassment here." And that's when I really snapped. I let out a sharp laugh, shaking my head. "Oh, I get it now. You don't care that mom and dad treat me like a goddamn ATM. You don't care that I've spent years paying their bills, while you sit in your perfect little house posting crock-blessed selfies. You just don't want your in-laws to see what a bunch of gold-digging leeches you all are." Her husband's parents, who had been politely silent up until now, suddenly looked very interested in their wine glasses. Her husband shifted uncomfortably, clearly realizing this was no longer a family misunderstanding, but something a hell of a lot uglier. My sister's face paled, and she took a sharp step toward me, lowering her voice. "Jesus, can you not do this right now?" she hissed, her eyes wild, like she could still put the mask back on if I just shut up and left. But I wasn't done. "No, I am doing this right now," I shot back, "because I'm sick of this whole fake-ass act. Mom and dad treat you like royalty while I bankroll their entire existence, and you sit back and let it happen. You know what the worst part is? If I hadn't walked in on this little dinner party, you would have let me keep paying their bills forever while they ran around lying to my face. And now that I'm done, suddenly I'm the villain. Right?" I turned to my parents, my voice sharp. "You didn't need me when I called you at 2 a.m., but you need me now that the bank's calling? Funny how that works." Silence. Heavy. Awkward. Exactly what they deserved. My sister clenched her jaw, glancing back at her husband's parents like she could still salvage this. "You're acting crazy," she muttered under her breath. I exhaled sharply, leveling them with a look. "Number, I just finally see things for what they are. And guess what? The ATM is officially closed. Permanently. Without another word, I walked over to the hall closet, grabbed the car seat base, and headed for the door. But just before stepping out, I paused, turning back one last time. Oh, and that mortgage payment I usually cover on the first of the month? Don't expect it. Ever again. You're on your own now. My mom gasped like I had physically struck her. You can't do that. We're your parents. I met her panicked stare, completely unfazed. Watch me. Then I walked out and didn't look back. I got in my car, hands shaking so bad I can barely put the key in the ignition. The weight of what just happened, what I just said, hits me all at once. 6 years of paying their bills, rent, utilities, everything, over. Just like that. And you know what's crazy? I don't feel guilty. I felt relieved. I drove to the hospital, picked up my wife and new son, got our daughter from Mike's house, and headed home. Our daughter is thrilled with her baby brother. My wife notices something's up and asks what happened. I tell her everything. She just listens, then hugs me tight and says, "It's about time." Then I grabbed my laptop, logged into every single account tied to my parents, and started cutting them off. Mortgage, canceled. Utilities, gone. Cell phone plan, removed. Grocery money, not a dime more. Every automatic payment I had set up for them, years of my hard-earned money funneled into their lives without so much as a thank you, was erased in a matter of minutes. With each cancellation, I felt lighter, like I was shedding the weight of an obligation that was never really mine to begin with. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls and about 30 text messages. No joke. My mom, my dad, my sister, all blowing up my phone like it was the end of the world. I didn't read most of them, just scrolled through quickly to make sure there wasn't an actual emergency. Mom's texts started with guilt trips. How could you embarrass us like that in front of everyone? And after everything we've done for you, then they moved to fake concern. We're worried about you. You're not acting like yourself. By the next day, they turned to threats. Your father is talking to his friend who's a lawyer about this? About what exactly? Me not giving them free money anymore? Good fucking luck with that case. My sister's texts were exactly what you'd expect from her. All about how I ruined a nice family dinner and made mom cry, and how I was always so jealous of her. Not a single mention of my newborn son or my wife who, just gave birth. I blocked all their numbers without responding. Felt good, not gonna lie. Then the real circus began. My phone started ringing with numbers I didn't recognize. I answered one, and it was my aunt, mom's sister, telling me how concerned everyone was, and how I needed to make things right with my parents before it's too late. I hung up and blocked her too. Then came the people from their church. People I barely know calling to tell me how disappointed they were in my behavior, how honor thy father and mother is a commandment, and all that bullshit. Block. The best one was this old lady from their church who I've met maybe twice, calling to tell me that my mother was beside herself with worry and not sleeping because of me. I actually laughed and said, well, now she knows how it feels to be up all night with a newborn, and hung up. My wife was amazing through all of this. She's on maternity leave, recovering from giving birth, taking care of our newborn, and still managing to keep our daughter entertained. All while I'm dealing with this family drama storm and trying to get back to work. I only took a week off because we need the money, especially now that I'm not bankrolling my parents anymore. About a week after everything went down, my sister showed up at our house. Luckily, I was at work, but my wife was home with the kids. My wife said my sister rang the doorbell about 20 times, then started calling through the mail slot like some kind of psycho. My wife didn't answer. She just texted me to let me know what was happening. Our neighbor came over and asked my sister if she needed to call the police. According to my neighbor, my sister turned white as a sheet and took off. Haven't seen her since. But the financial fallout hit them faster than I expected. About 3 weeks after I stopped paying their bills, my dad called from a new number I hadn't blocked yet. The electric company is threatening to shut off our power, he said. No hello or anything. And the mortgage company called about being late. That sounds like a problem you need to solve, I replied. Son, we're your parents. You can't just leave us high and dry like this. What are we supposed to do? Well, Dad, you could get a part-time job. Mom could babysit for money instead of for free just for my sister. You could sell that boat you never use. You could downsize to a smaller place. You have options. At our age, who's going to hire us? Walmart hires greeters. Home Depot has plenty of retired folks working there. Or you could ask your golden child for help for once. There was a long pause. Your sister has her own expenses. So do I, Dad. Like a new baby, for instance. You can try asking her husband since y'all been having dinner and playing family. This isn't like you, son. Your mother thinks you're having some kind of breakdown. I had to laugh at that. The breakdown was letting you guys take advantage of me for years. Tell mom I said hi. Then I hung up and blocked that number too. The most pathetic attempt came about a month after the initial blowup. My dad sent me an email, since he couldn't call, with the subject line, health emergency. My heart actually dropped for a second. Despite everything, they're still my parents. I opened it to find a long explanation about how my mom's blood pressure was dangerously high because of the stress I was causing, and how the doctor said she might have a stroke if things continue this way. The email ended with, "We just thought you should know what you're doing to your mother's health. I'm not a doctor, but I'm pretty sure high blood pressure doesn't work that way. And even if it did, it's not my responsibility to maintain my mom's health by giving them thousands of dollars a month." I didn't respond to the email, but I did forward it to my sister with a short message. "Your turn." She never replied. Meanwhile, my actual family, my wife and kids, were doing great. Our son started sleeping for 3 to 4 hour stretches, which felt like winning the lottery after those first few weeks of hourly wake-ups. My wife's parents came to visit for a week to help out, and it was actually pleasant. They cooked, helped with the kids, and didn't once make passive-aggressive comments or ask for money. Wild concept, I know. About 2 months after the whole thing went down, we were starting to find our groove as a family of four, and we were actually putting money into savings instead of sending it to my parents. It felt like we could finally breathe. Then one Saturday morning, I was in the front yard with my daughter, teaching her how to ride her new bike without training wheels. She's fearless. When a car I didn't recognize pulled up. At first, I thought it was just someone turning around in our driveway. Out stepped my parents, looking like they'd aged 10 years since I last saw them. My daughter spotted them before I could react and yelled for her grandparents, because of course she doesn't understand the situation. My mom immediately put on this sugary sweet smile that didn't reach her eyes and started walking toward my kid with her arms open. I moved between them faster than I thought possible. I kept my voice level because my daughter was right there and asked them what they were doing at our house. My mom acted like it was the most obvious thing in the world. They came to see their grandchildren, especially the new baby they hadn't met yet. I told them they weren't invited and needed to leave. My dad stepped forward, hands in his pockets, looking uncomfortable, pleading with me to let them see the baby since my mother had been beside herself. I muttered something sarcastic, then asked my daughter to go inside and tell my wife we had visitors. She looked confused but headed inside. My mom tried to follow her, but I blocked the path. I firmly told her she wasn't coming in and wasn't seeing the baby. She'd lost that privilege when she lied about being too sick to help us, then tried to pick up my daughter from preschool without permission. My mom tried to play it off as a misunderstanding, but I called her out on lying about a family emergency. My wife appeared at the door, took one look at them, and shut it. That's when my dad finally admitted the real reason they were here. The bank was threatening foreclosure, and they needed money. I asked if they'd gone to my sister, and my mom mumbled something about her saving for a pool. Of course, I told them I wasn't their backup plan anymore. They hadn't even asked my son's name, and when my mom guessed wrong, I made it clear. His name was James, after the grandparent who actually cared. My mom cried about losing their house, but I reminded her that was on them, not me. Then, in a last-ditch effort, she screamed about having rights to see my kids. I shut that down fast. My dad saw it was over and tried to get her to leave, but she just stared at me, like I was the one who betrayed them. As they got in the car, I overheard her say they should have gone to a lawyer first. Then they drove off, and I just stood there, breathing. My wife asked if I was okay, and for the first time in a long time, I really was. A few weeks after that, I heard through a mutual acquaintance that my parents had gotten desperate enough to approach my sister's in-laws for money. Apparently, they showed up unannounced at some fancy dinner party my sister and her husband were hosting with his parents. My mom put on her best, poor, suffering grandmother act, talking about how they were about to lose their house because their ungrateful son, that's me, had cruelly abandoned them. What they didn't count on was my sister's husband actually speaking up. Turns out he remembered that night when I caught them all having dinner while my wife was in labor. He called them out in front of his parents, saying he'd witnessed firsthand how they'd lied about being too sick to help with my daughter, only to be perfectly fine hosting a family dinner hours later. He flat out told them he wasn't comfortable giving money to people who treated their own son that way. My mom tried to spin some story about how it was all a misunderstanding, but my sister's father-in-law, who's apparently some no-nonsense businessman, just asked her why they couldn't downsize or get part-time jobs like other retirees. My dad mumbled something about his age, and my sister's mother-in-law pointed out that her own father still worked part-time at 75. My sister, seeing her meal ticket slipping away, jumped in to defend our parents, which led to a huge argument with her husband right there in front of everyone. According to my source, it got ugly fast. Her husband asked why she never contributed to their care if they were so important to her. My sister called me during that time. She didn't even say hello when I picked up, just launched straight into a screaming tirade. "You fucking asshole! You ruined everything!" She yelled so loud, I had to hold the phone away from my ear. When I asked what she was talking about, she went ballistic. Said I'd poisoned her in-laws against our parents on purpose to get back at her. That I was jealous of her life and wanted to destroy her marriage. According to her, I'd been playing the martyr for years by insisting on handling our parents' finances just to make her look bad. And now I deliberately sabotaged her relationship with her husband's family by making her look like some heartless bitch who wouldn't help her own parents. She actually said, "My marriage is falling apart, and it's all your fault," before hanging up on me. I just sat there staring at my phone, thinking how insane it was that even now, she couldn't see her own part in any of this. The night ended with my sister and her husband leaving separately, and my parents being awkwardly driven home by one of the dinner guests. The next day, my sister apparently called my parents and blamed them for embarrassing her in front of her in-laws. My mom fired back that my sister was ungrateful after all they'd done for her. The golden child shine was definitely wearing off. Within a week, the gossip mill had it that my sister and her husband were in marriage counseling, my parents had to sell their house and move into a tiny apartment, and my dad got a job as a greeter at a big box store. My sister refused to let them move in, despite having 4 empty bedrooms in that massive house. The final straw came when my mom suggested my sister sell some of her designer handbags to help with their bills. According to my cousin, my sister actually screamed that this was all my fault for ruining everyone's lives. Funny how quickly the golden child status evaporates when money's involved, and the backup plan, me, is no longer available. And yeah, it's been 6 months now. Our son is crawling, getting into everything. Our daughter started kindergarten and loves it. We moved into a house in a better school district. Nothing fancy, just a decent 4-bedroom with a good yard. The mortgage is actually less than what we were paying for our old place plus my parents' bills, which is pretty damn ironic. Last week, we took the kids to the park. As I pushed my daughter on the swing, my wife sitting nearby with the baby, I realized something. I'm happy. Genuinely happy. Without the constant drain of my toxic family's demands and expectations, I can focus on what really matters. My wife, my kids, our future together. Sometimes standing up for yourself means walking away from people who've known you your whole life. And sometimes that's exactly what you need to do to start really living. My daughter squealed with delight as the swing went higher. My son gurgled happily in my wife's arms. This, right here, is what family should feel like. Not obligation or guilt or constant demands. Just love.